Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reed of the Future Pastimes, and in this video I'm going to be talking about some strategies and tips for Terror Token placement. So the Moritani faction has these 4 Terror Tokens, and they get to place a Terror Token at the end of each game turn in the Mentat pause. So once you've gone through all of the phases, you get to the end. It's the end of turn 1. The Moritani player may choose to place one of these 6 Terror Tokens, and their faction sheet explains the Terror Tokens and their terrorize advantage, starting with the Atomics token and explaining the other effects. These are placed in strongholds. They can be placed in a stronghold, including one that's under storm, but they cannot place one in the hidden mobile stronghold. And has been asked with the Jacurudu Siege Discovery token. That is a stronghold, and yes, they can place a Terror token there if they wish. And if you're using the Shield Wall Stronghold rules, this will count as a stronghold as well, where they can place a Terror token. So they cannot place one in a stronghold that already has a Terror token in it. And these are placed face down. So the Moritani player is going to have their shield, and they will be behind the shield with their Terror tokens, and then they can choose. Now, they don't have to place one, but I think you are going to want to place one. So we're going to talk about some tips about where you might want to put some tokens and in which order you may want to put them. So I think unquestionably the most powerful effect in the game is the Atomics token. So let's start off by talking about that one a little bit. And then it comes with an aftermath token as well. That once this has been triggered, you're going to put this token in the stronghold as a marker. And that is because once you have triggered it, so what's going to happen is, let me back up. Let's just quickly cover how these are triggered and when. So let's say that you have placed a Terror token down on a subsequent turn, so as early as the next turn. Whenever somebody else other than Moritani or Moritani's ally, if they're in an alliance, anybody else who sends forces through either shipment or movement into the stronghold with the face down Terror token, the Moritani player may choose to reveal it, thereby activating and triggering its effect. The activation of the Terror token cannot be Karama'd, only the placement of it. So if you want to stop Moritani from putting a Terror token down, you can use a Karama to do that, but you cannot prevent them from revealing it. The wheels are already in motion. The terrorists are already in the city, and they're autonomous. they're going to work no matter what. So the force moving in for any reason, shipping or movement into that stronghold, the token can be revealed and triggered. And this includes advisors. So if let's say that Atreides ships 10 forces into Carthage, and Moritani says, no, we do not trigger it. And then Bene Gesserit says, we're going to send an advisor in there. Yes, they can. That's how insidious these Terror tokens are. Now, if you have advisors already in this stronghold and you decide to flip them to fighters, that does not trigger. They're already there. So it's just the bringing the tokens in through shipment or movement. So we were talking a little bit about atomics. The thing is when you trigger atomics, it's going to destroy all the forces in that stronghold. Even Moritani, if they have forces there, it's just like a laser gun shield explosion. Everybody there is killed. And then you put this there as a reminder, because moving forward, no faction, even Moritani, can ship directly to this territory. Can't use a shipment action to move straight here. You can still move in. Carthage still counts as a stronghold for the win. It hasn't been removed. It still has increased collection. If you have forces there, you still have ornithopters. If you have forces there, you just can't ship, and that can be a bigger deal than it might seem. But and that will include if you have destroyed Tabor with the atomics. The Fremen cannot ship directly to Tabor. They can still move in. Normally, they can ship straight into this territory, but now they are restricted. Everyone is restricted from using a shipping action to bring forces directly into this territory. There is one other side effect of the atomics token. Moritani and their allies' hand limit is reduced by 1. So if you're allied with Moritani and you have four treachery cards, you'll have to discard a random card if your hand exceeds the limit. So that's fairly punishing. This is the Lance Rad coming down on you for using atomics as Moritani and for being their ally, a direct ally. So some sanctions against you. Once you break an alliance with Moritani, this no longer holds true for you as the ally. It still will hold true for Moritani. And if somebody else forms an alliance, through a nexus or through enemy of my enemy, that restriction will still, that hand size restriction will still happen. So, but where? Well, you notice that I used Carthag as my example, and I think Carthag makes a very good target for atomics, and that is because it makes it very hard for somebody to be sneaky by shipping into Carthag and then moving to Arakeen or to Tabor to go for a sneaky win. But that's a dual-edged crysknife there. It means that Moritani can't do it either. He can't ship directly in there. So while this is a very attractive target, I might consider only doing that if I'm in a position of weakness as Moritani. And again, this can work against you. So there are reasons why you might bluff and put something else there. I think that using atomics as your first terror token at the end of the first turn, so if it's turn 1, Mentat pause, putting atomics down, I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily a good idea. If you've got, if there are 10 Harkonnen forces here and you're thinking about trying to cripple the Harkonnen player, that might be a move, because what can happen is, let's say that Harkonnen does have 10. Maybe you try to coerce or bribe or just convince somebody to just send one force over in there. Say, yeah, it's a suicide mission, because as soon as you send your one force in there, I will reveal the atomics. Your one force will be gone, but the 10 or however many, Harkonnen may have more, there would also be taken out. And that is a good way to take the Baron down a couple of pegs. It'll take him probably 2 game turns to recover enough from that. Maybe more, just depends. It might be spice poor as well. Who knows? So that is certainly an interesting use for atomics. As a Moritani player, you want to have as much collateral damage as possible when you do reveal this. It'd be nice if, there were 10 forces in there and somebody sent in another 10 to have a big fight, and then boom. But the thing is that once you've got these terror tokens on the board, it paralyzes a lot of the other factions. They're afraid to set these things off, and maybe they're only sending one force in, but sending in only one force, not very effective for any other game purposes. So maybe you don't reveal it. You're like, all right, if you want to fight the Baron there with your one force, good luck with that. So, and maybe you just don't set it off until the time is right. But for that reason, I generally don't consider using atomics right away. I like to keep it in my back pocket for a couple of game turns to use as a way, if I'm taking some hits and I'm falling behind, I don't have any good treachery cards, I'm low on spice, Maybe I went for the win and it didn't work, or I had a trader call at a bad moment work against me, and so I'm in a weak position. I might consider putting the atomics token down as a way to level the playing field. Or if I am about to get myself in a much stronger position, like I think next turn, maybe it's turn 3 or 4, and I'm thinking next turn is the turn I think I want to try to go for it. I've got enough spice, I've got a good position, maybe I've got a good ally, or maybe I'm just well positioned. And so now I'm considering putting the atomics down as a way to screw up somebody else in a stronghold where I'm not too concerned, or as a way to clear somebody out so that I can then move into that stronghold. So, yeah, I set this aside. There are other tokens that I'm more likely to place on turn 1. So let's look at some of these. So we have Assassination. This is where, when it gets triggered, a random leader from that player will be killed, and you, as Moritani, will get spice for that leader. So this is a way you can get a couple of spice. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get 5 or 6 spice, maybe 7, but don't count on it. So this was an interesting one. This one here with the I've got a knife at your throat and I want spice, that's extortion. And this one you'll get 5 spice, but you're going to get it at the Mentat pause. So it's a way to get 5 spice. You could get as much as 3 more spice, because this is the one token that you can get back. Once it's been triggered in the Mentat pause, the other players going in storm order, each one has the opportunity to give you 3 spice in order to make this token go away. And so that could be an 8 spice round. A lot of times the players are like, nobody wants to pay it. But if you've got a couple of economic factions, one of them might want to make that happen. So this is another way to get spice. Then we have Robbery. It's the hand that's reaching into your pocket, either for spice or it's going to try to take the top treachery card. So this is going to be a little bit situational, and depending on who's triggering it. So you can steal half the spice rounded up of the player who triggers it. So you're looking for the Emperor or the Guild, maybe Chom, maybe Tleilaxu. Maybe somebody, maybe the Fremen they've gone to a couple of spice blows and they've just raked in some spice. This might be, you want to pay attention to who's got the spice. And by the time you get to shipping and movement, they may have spent a lot of spice on treachery cards. You need to pay a little bit of attention to that. And then, of course, if you don't have a full hand, or even if you do, because you can discard a card, maybe it's a good way to get rid of a worthless card. But usually you don't have a full hand. So getting the top card off the treachery deck, that might be a good one as well. Pay attention to whether or not the Ixians are in the game and where they've put the card that they suppress. But it could be a card you get that nobody has knowledge about. So that's going to be situational. I'll get back to that one a little bit. Sabotage is a good way to take down somebody with a full hand, or somebody's got a good hand, or they have a really good card and you're hoping to get it out of their hand. So you'll be drawing a random card from their hand to discard. It gives you the option to also give them a treachery card. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here. But again, this is a good way for you to unload a worthless card if you've got it, or cheap hero, or something else you're like, I don't really need this. Get rid of it. Then we have Sneak Attack, which lets you send up to 5 forces into that territory at no cost. You are subject to storm and occupancy, but you can ship there even if the Atomics Aftermath token is there. So that's an interesting thing, because once you've set off Atomics, if it's in that territory and nobody can ship there, maybe you put the Sneak Attack there later on. But as you can see, these first 3 here are ways for you to get spice. And I think spice is really important. It's the key to everything. So that is why this one tends to be one of the ones that I place first. And that is because as it's going to get you 5 spice for sure for the next game turn. So you play it at the end of turn 1 or turn 2, either way. And if you can trigger it in the next turn, then during turn 2, then in turn 3, you'll have that 5, maybe 8 spice. And one of the reasons I put it down early is because of the fact that I will probably get it back. So I think a little more than half the time Moritani gets this token back. So it's more useful that if it gets placed early so that you can place it again. And I will give you the alternative to why you don't do this strategy here again in a moment. So that is another. That's one that I tend to place early. The other one I tend to place early is this one right here, the robbery one. And that is because, again, in the first couple of turns, Moritani probably won't have a full hand of treachery cards, so it's nice to get that card. And if you've got a lousy one, it'll be nice to, even if you have a full hand, get rid of it. If for that reason, or in the early game, unless you're playing with some really aggressive players or somebody who's using a spend all your spice strategy for an economic faction, knowing that you're just going to get more spice. So Cho maybe spends all of their spice, ship a bunch of forces down, they buy a bunch of cards, but they're going to have, they're going to get that income again. That's why they do it. So by the time you get to the next shipping and movement, again, if you're paying attention to who has spice, you might be able to strike fairly big, fairly early on. It just depends. Like if on turn one, a lot of factions ship, then you know that the guild has a lot of spice and they may be more spice than they can spend right away. Sometimes a player playing the Emperor doesn't spend much of their spice on cards that first turn or two. They're just getting all the income and saving it up for a rainy day. Well, this is a good opportunity to make it rain for yourself. So these two I like to play fairly early on, just to give myself a chance to get some spice and strike while the iron is hot. In the mid game and late game, even economic factions sometimes are a little bit strapped. They've had to spend spice to get forces out. They're having to spend spice for their allies and stuff like that. So you might not get as much that's useful here. So it's hard to say. It's going to be situational, but I think you can almost always do pretty well with either of these in the early game. So that's something to think about. And if you're playing advanced and you've got the assassinate leaders, this is something that I like to play with this as potentially as a way to really put the hurting on a particular faction. So let's say that you've drawn an Atreides leader as your first one. So you get into a fight with them just so that you can assassinate their leader, especially if you get one of their five. So you're like, oh, I've got Jessica. I'm going to get into a fight. If they don't play Jessica, I'm going to assassinate her, and that's 5 spice. And you have killed one of their strongest leaders. And then at the end of that turn, maybe you put assassinate leaders right in the stronghold with their other forces. And you're going to just wait to see if they ship any more in there. Now, maybe they don't. Maybe they're afraid of what it is, and they have good reason to be afraid. Maybe you put it next door. So again, like in this example, Atreides, you consider putting this in Arakeen. Maybe put it in Carthag. And, you try to convince them to go in here and harass the Harkonnen so that you can set this off, because they think it's atomics. And really, you're just setting them up to assassinate, and hopefully you're getting their other 5. So now if they've got 2 leaders in the tanks, that can be pretty crippling for a particular faction, especially if you get a couple of their big leaders. If you've got a Bene Gesserit, you're taking out a 5 no matter what, and then maybe you're going to get another 5 with this one, remembering that you can, let's say that you put this, because remember, Moritani starts in any empty territory. So it's not unusual for them to start with 6 forces right there. And, you've assassinated you've used your assassinate on Bene Gesserit to kill one of the leaders, or maybe you haven't, but you've put this here, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to ship a couple forces there, and you're hoping that the Bene Gesserit send along an advisor so that you can, boom, assassinate one of their leaders. So that's a leader that's in the tanks, and then you're hoping to get into a fight with them, and maybe they want to get into a fight with you for revenge, but you're just setting that up to assassinate another one of their leaders. Bene Gesserit, good targets for this sort of thing. That's 5 spice each time, 10 spice for killing them, and then you'll get a new traitor. So this is one that sometimes it just depends on whether or not you're playing advanced and who you've got in there. And I like to try to capitalize on that if I can. So this is another one. And again, that trick, I like to put it right where I am. Putting a terror token where you are is a great deterrent. Nobody wants to come into that territory. So your forces are relatively safe. Now, you start with 6 forces in any territory. So 6 forces in any occupied territory after all their factions have set up. So maybe, on those early turns, I'll grab from here, you're like, I'm just going to ship 4 forces down into, this territory. And then if they're still there at the end of the game turn, you put that there. And then most, all things being equal, these 4 forces here are probably going to be safe for a couple of turns. Unless somebody is like feeling very reckless or desperate and they set this off because they're like, I got to get into this stronghold. So they're worried about what this is. But if I've got a small number of forces on the board, the token that I actually want to put there is not assassinate. It's this one right here. This is the sneak attack, because this 4 forces can become 8 forces. Or in fact, 9 forces. And that's free. It's not your shipment. This is an extra little thing that gets to happen. And, it's going to happen during shipping and movement. You might still be able to ship again. Maybe you move some of those forces out or whatever. Maybe if somebody ships in here and they've triggered sneak attacks, and now there's 9, and maybe they only sent 5, and they're like, well, I'm going to move out of here. And if they're doing that before your turn, then you can move some or all of your forces out as well, because this token it's not your action. It's a free extra action. So that can be handy as well. You putting it in where the aftermath token is nice, but this is a nice little extra thing to do as well, to bolster a low number of your forces that you have been protecting with the token. But if they call your bluff, well, now you have called their bluff. So that is another one to think about as well. This one, I almost always wait until later in the game. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to target somebody who has a good hand, and it's extra juicy if you can do it while you have a cruddy card in your hand, so that you can force them to take it. So this one I'm almost never playing early on, unless, again, it's some way as a deterrent. So just to say, like, all right, if somebody's going to come mess with me here, where I have 6 forces, because they're like, well, I've got both types of weapons, so I'll be able to use my prescience or the voice to help out with that. Well, they didn't count on losing one of those cards. And maybe even if they're not, especially if they're not Bene Gesserit or Atreides, they were just like, yeah, we saw early on you have a snooper, so I've got a projectile weapon. I can get around that, but now they might just lose it. So that is... that's a reason that you might want to think about this. And that's what I like about these tokens, is it really gives you some flexibility. It really lets you lean into whatever your particular style of play is, but also the way the other players. So if you know the other players, or you're familiar with how they work, or you've got a sense of their dynamics, you have some moves to counter what you suspect that they're going to do. You've got a few things to move. But like I said, so I'm usually not, and of course I have to change my strategy completely if anybody watches this video and I'm playing with them. These 2 are not tokens that I typically play right away. It will of course depend on the mix of factions and the players, but it's usually going to be one of these. It might be this one, and this is another consideration for me. Just depending on the board state at the end. So if this is the state at the end of the turn, like I started here and then I managed to get some forces here, or maybe down into Tuix, almost certainly not in one of the cities, but anything is possible. Just depends. Like if everyone's going after spice bows, and let's say that Harkonnen and or Atreides are not in the game, so you have a lot more open strongholds to start with, and maybe you're like, yeah, I will start there. So if this is the state, I definitely want a deterrent, and I'm more likely gonna put it here on this city, and so I will probably go with this, possibly with that, as a way to. This is also, if depends on what kind of cards I have in my hand. If I don't have any weapons or defenses, this might be what I play because I'm looking at that free treachery card as a little bit of a Hail Mary for my deterrent. So if I don't have any good treachery cards, this might be my best play here. But if I've got something decent, or depends on what leader. If I've got as a trader card, if I'm using advanced, I might go with the extortion just to get the spice, or the sneak attack again as a way to freely bolster these 4 forces by bringing in 5 more. So that's those are my thoughts on just some initial ideas. And like I said, I think it's I think it's great that there isn't an obvious, like, yes, you always use this one as your first one, or yes, always use atomics and put it in Carthag. There is no, I don't think there is no, yes, always use this in any circumstance. I think that the circumstances will be different from game to game, and that's going to inform your choices a little bit differently. But I give you some of my thoughts on how I want to place these, which ones I'm more likely to save until later. I might save this until much later as well. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, because it is really critical, and it is about terror tokens and their placement, and that is enemy of my enemy. So the way this works, and this is a basic advantage, so you're always going to have this as an option. Any faction other than ECAS, because there's just some lines that Moritani won't cross. When they would trigger a terror token, you can offer to enter into an alliance with them, and if they agree, you get the token back and it is not revealed. If they don't agree, then they're going to trigger it. And what you can do is you can have this token somewhere, and when it is so-and-so's turn, let's say it's the Baron's turn, he's coming up here, before he even does anything, you can sort of say, hey, you know what, Harkonnen? If you go into this territory, we might be able to find ourselves in an alliance. And, and maybe there was no nexus, so nobody else is in an alliance. And that's what's really insidious about enemy of my enemy. Because you are in 2 strongholds, and maybe they ship here and move into there, and now they're in 2, and you're in an alliance, or you put it here, because Harkonnen already has 10 forces there, so you're like, yeah, I'm going to ship down 10 more forces right here, and then not trigger the token. So what you put there, at the end of the day, it won't matter, because you're going to get it back without having to reveal what it was. But where you place it can be very important. So you may not want to put a token where you are if that's what you're hoping it can be used for, is to get into an alliance. So you may want to be thinking about, all right, what's the board state at the end of the turn? We get to the Mentat pawns. You're trying to figure out what to do. You know that for your shipping action, you can ship more in here if you need to. And so what you want to be able to do is get into an alliance. And so you're going to put this somewhere where it can be very useful. And it could be useful here, because again, if they ship there, they could move there. They're already in a stronghold. Let's say the guild has got a bunch of forces here, and you're hoping that the guild will maybe ship a bunch of forces, send 10 forces right into Arakeen to trigger this. You're now in alliance. They have to leave, and they're going to move into Carthag with their movement action, so that you guys are in 4 territories. And if they've gone last, well, then it doesn't matter that you only have 4 forces there, because no one else is coming in after you. So the turn order can be very important, and you want to be looking at that. You're not going to know, if the storm is here, it's the end of the turn. You don't know how far it's going to move, but it's probably not going to move farther than here, which means that this player is going to be going first. Or maybe this player. It could be this player. Well, if it only goes 1, if you're playing advanced, it could go 1. If you're not playing advanced, it's going to go at least 2. So this player is definitely not going to be going first. And of course, yes, weather control can change all these things, but we got to plan for what we is most likely to happen. So you might be thinking about these factions right here. These guys for sure, and this one for sure. This one possibly. What kind of a shape are these factions in? Are they likely to be strong, and would one of them make a good ally? And again, preferably, maybe somebody who's going to go late when nobody can do anything about it. That might be the way to go. But if you're like, yeah, great, this thing moved in, this guy's going last, that could be a person that you want to think about. So you gotta plan for that sort of thing as much as you can. Where do you think the storm is going to be? Who's going to be going first? It's almost not your best plan to get into a enemy of my enemy alliance with the person who's going to go first, unless they're just really strong and you're also in a good strong position. Yes, there are going to be circumstances where this actually is a pretty good idea, so you can do it. But generally speaking, it's better to form that alliance later in the shipping and movement phase, because then the people who are going earlier can't do anything about it. They can be worried about it. They can be worried that somebody might try to do that. And if they're smart, they are. They're like, Moritani's in 2. This token's here. There's no nexus. We've gotten up to here. We've gotten past the spice bow. There was no nexus, and nobody's in an alliance. Yeah. The thing about this, too, is that if there are alliances, whoever triggers this can get out of their alliance. And so can Moritani if either or both of them are in alliances to form a new alliance, which means that 1 or 2 factions will now be solo. So that is also sometimes problematic, because now they don't have their alliance advantages from their former allies. So yeah, very delicious. I think this enemy of my enemy is one of the most powerful advantages of the Moritani, and it is, of course, dependent on where those terror tokens are. So keep that in mind, and let me know in the comments your thoughts about the terror token placement. What have you seen effective as an early token? How are they working as deterrents? How are they working as triggering an alliance? That's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.